We've built pretty much the first half of the assembly. Now we're going to look at the rotational components. So we're going to build up into, we have the driver pin, and I called it the driver shaft. So just a quick double check, drag it in. Okay, we'll grab our two cylinders, and those become concentric. And we don't know which side is going to rotate, which side gets the bearing, which side gets the bushing, but I will put the bottom face into contact, so select, control, select. And since I either missed or the pop-up didn't show up, we'll go into the mate and apply coincident. And since that one didn't go where I expected it to, well, those were selected. Let's go ahead and accept it and do a rebuild. Alright, so it didn't move until I accepted it. And the concentric, I didn't get the lock rotation on, so we'll go ahead and place it. Alright, so we're just going to align those, and we'll determine rotation from the drive wheel. Okay, so move that out of the way a little bit. Pick the surface, pick the cylinder face, concentric. And we do not want to lock rotation on this one. We're going to see it move. Alright, and then zoom in, zoom out, find our parts to be coincident. And then Control 7 puts me back in isometric. And now I want to be able to see this move. Okay, so let's go find the driver pin, and we'll get that close and make it concentric. Really doesn't matter if it rotates or not. So the mate reference that I applied to the slider, we could do that to all of the parts, and if we recognize the the usefulness as we go through that process, then we could kind of do it as we're generating the parts. If we're going to bring in something like the pins where there's a lot of them, the rest of the parts, if there's not really that many, then it's probably not worthwhile to add them to everything. Alright, so let's see how we align. And got a few extra things there, so let's go ahead and select, control, select the cylinders. It's concentric. So that looks pretty close. In the assembly, it looked like there was a little bit of an angle, but maybe not. So if I select and control select, we go to coincident, and then concentric. Alright, and so I have that little bit of a gap, and it kind of shows that in the assembly, so got to zoom up on it a little ways to get it in there. See if we drag that back in, you can kind of see that that one's flush, and then it's got that little section where the pin is proud of that surface. Alright, so as we go through the process, we're going to rotate, and we're going to be able to see that that move. And the items that are capable of moving, that's fine. If the pin rotates, if other things are rotating, we're really not going to see that as a problem. What I do want is, if my default is to have this move, then I would like to create a configuration, and this one will just be a static. Sometimes I create the static and then I make a dynamic configuration. It just kind of depends on what the functionality is of this part. So if I was going to pick a location, probably just go with the arm And the right plane, the top plane looks pretty good. And if I go back to the front plane and I make those parallel, even if there was a misalignment in the slider or the arm, that stack up shouldn't be too terrible. And with the parallels, it'll allow for a little bit of variation as opposed to making it coincident. So this, the test is, if I go back to default, is to move this around and then back to static. Now it went back to the closest solution. So if I go into the default, if I want it in a certain spot, then I'm probably going to have to add another mate, maybe a distance mate from the end here, to make sure that when I go back into static, it's always going to return to that same position. All right, so not real critical at this point. So let's go ahead and create our exploded view. And we'll come over to the command manager, exploded view. And when I go through, I'm going to check real quick. I'm not auto-spacing the components. So we can go with the arm, and then I'm going to drag it in Y. We'll give a little bit of distance. All right, and then that's done. We can go ahead and move the pins together. So if I select both of those, that's going to make it a group. And then done. And if I wanted to switch over to the auto space, let's go ahead and turn that on. We'll grab both of those. And the auto space will be how much? Now these are new for 2020, so I haven't seen these. So center of bounding box, rear bounding box to order components, front. Alright, so I'm going to have to see what those do. Alright, so those extend out. And that doesn't look too bad, so we can go ahead with done. And then maybe the supports will go up. Now there wasn't really a need to auto space, so I'm going to turn off the auto space in that group. If I want to adjust the spacing manually, we can type in a value, and when I hit done, that's where it's going to pick up. Let's go ahead and grab the pins, and then we'll drag those out. Alright, so for my isometric view, let's see, make sure I hit done. My isometric view, that's looking pretty good. And so everything's been kind of vertically. Let's just go ahead and grab the slider, and we'll bring it out front. That's not quite long enough or far enough, so 120. That looks a little bit better, and done. Alright, so we've got a reasonable amount of spacing. Those look pretty good. This was created under the static, so the exploded view will always be in that same relative position. If something happened that was round the other way, again, I could go back and add another mate and force the issue. If we collapse, then it returns to the position. If we explode, and then you also have the ability to animate. So that's the order isn't that critical, but it does. If we're going to save it as an animation for the explode and collapse, then that's going to determine the orders so that it generates the file kind of the way we want it. Okay, that should be good for assembly.